I'm tremendously privileged to invite Josh Francis to the stage. He is an associate professor in paediatric infectious diseases from the Royal Darwin Hospital. Welcome, Josh.
Thanks very much. It's great to be back in Brisbane, my hometown. And I want to acknowledge the Turrbal and Yagara people of this land and acknowledge that this is traditional land of Aboriginal people and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I'm so grateful for the welcome that we had this morning, but also to acknowledge and respect Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are here today. I've flown down from Darwin, from the land of the Larrakia people, with one of my kids, Zoe's down here in the front, and privileged also, as part of this talk, to share some of the stories and things that I've learned from the Gunabidji people from Maningrida in Arnhem Land, but also to bring to you stories from Timor-Leste, a place that is just across the ocean, in fact an hour flight from where we live in Larrakia Land in Darwin, much closer than getting here to Brisbane. And you know, like the boundaries that we would have to cross to get to Timor-Leste, but even, to be honest, the boundaries to get from the Northern Territory to Queensland changed a lot in the last 2 or 3 years. And I think all of us have had that experience of travel being so much harder than it used to be, and I think for a lot of you, there's this relief in having been able to travel again, and perhaps for some of you, you've travelled to be here today like I have, and getting across those borders, those boundaries has become easier again in a way that it wasn't. And for people separated by the boundaries of states, or even particularly the boundaries of countries, it's been a pretty difficult couple of years. I've got a clear memory from 2.5 years ago, March 2020, of arriving into an eerily deserted-looking Darwin airport, checking in 19 boxes of laboratory equipment and reagents and things to send across to Timor-Leste, boarding pass in hand, and then hearing this announcement of level 4 travel restrictions in Australia. It was the first time that it got to this level 4 stage that seemed to go beyond the level 3, and it was a complete do not travel. Announced by the Prime Minister at the time, boarding pass in hand, thinking there's nothing for it, I've got the boarding pass, I'll get on the plane. Hopped on the plane and was literally the only passenger on a plane flying into Timor-Leste at a time of great uncertainty, but looking to get across to colleagues in Timor-Leste to work with the government there on responding to this enormous global challenge, the COVID-19 pandemic. And recognising even then, but more so over the subsequent couple of years, the impact that these borders have on health. And for a country like Timor-Leste, the sudden closing down, a necessary part of responding to a global pandemic, but also something that had such an impact on supply chains, on the movement of people, on the kind of support that a country like that could get. And I think probably as much as any other part of the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw this play out in the vaccine response. And the impact that borders have had where you live has made a difference to your chances of getting a vaccine. That's certainly made a difference to your chances of getting through the COVID-19 pandemic. And we heard in Australia that it wasn't a race. And people were upset that it wasn't a race, thinking it should be a race. But you know, this thinking that it should be a race, for me, hearing it just echoing in my brain, sounding so insular, like who do we think we're racing against? All of a sudden it became that it was a race. And so we were racing. We were racing because Australians should get vaccines. And this was like the concept, right? And pushing on this idea that yes, it's a race. Well, this is how the race played out around the world. In fact, this is how the race is still playing out around the world. Do you know, in low-income countries, approximately 20% of people have had a vaccine for COVID-19 so far. You know, like this is the race that we've been talking about, and it's a race that has further embedded these borders, these boundaries that say these people will do well and these people don't matter as much. And it's a travesty. And you know, we look at our country that looks like this island, and we've had it so good this last couple of years. I know that it's been hard. I've got friends from Melbourne. Like it's the COVID-19 pandemic has been hard on everyone. And actually, I don't say it facetiously because some of you will know people who have died as a result. And some of you will have been affected so closely by this that it still hurts to think about it. But I just want to say to you this morning, like, we're not an island that should be excluding these neighbours around us. We live in a world where, in fact, these boundaries, these borders can be broken down, and we can actually see each other, not just in our tribes within our hospital, but actually look across the ocean to a place like Timor-Leste. And this map shows you a little bit of our region, and I don't know some of these other places well, but I've been really fortunate over the last almost 10 years to be going back and forward to Timor-Leste. I've got a good friend and colleague here, Dr. Ella, in the room, and so many close friends over there. It's become a really important part of our life. And so I want this morning just to be able to share with you a little bit of some of the things that we've learnt from our Timorese colleagues and our friends, from people we would consider even as family. Because I've been asked to talk about healthcare and how Australia can help support healthcare across borders. And I think sometimes we can be so stuck thinking about what's right in front of us that we almost forget that the rest of the world is there. But if you're prepared this morning to look up and to think, yes, that's right, there is the rest of the world, there's a world out there and there are things that we can do. Here are some of the things that we've learnt about how to go about supporting and sharing the things that we have. And it starts with listening. And it has to start with listening. And I can't emphasize this enough, because I think sometimes we have it in our mind that there is something I can do and I'm going to do it and nothing's going to get in my way. And you can turn up with this mindset that you've come to save the day. I've come to bring this. I've come to bring this. I've come to bring this. And I would encourage you, if you want to make a difference in the world, and whether that's in your workplace or going out somewhere remote in Australia or heading overseas, to take a moment, to be prepared to sit and to listen, to hear the things that the people of that land will say to you, to understand their priorities and what they're looking for and what they're hoping to achieve and the kind of support that they're looking for, to take the time to understand the story, not just the story of today, not just the plan for what you will do, but the stories of yesterday and the times before and the things that have made for this context. In a country like Timor-Leste, it's understanding hundreds of years of colonization, followed by brutal invasion and occupation, followed by a struggle for independence, followed by so much that's happened then over the last 20 years. There are these stories that inform and create this place, and you have to be able to stop and to listen. It's the same with my, I want to say family. Ditto here in the middle. My father in a sort of kin kind of way, Manangrita, and being prepared to sit and to listen and to understand what the priorities are there and to take that on board. But you go and you want to sit and you want to listen, but also then look for ways that you can share. And I promise you that there are ways that you can share the skills, the knowledge, the experience that you've got, the opportunities that you've had, the money that you have. Like, we've got so much that we can offer. And so I don't want you to go away from here thinking, I've said there's nothing you can do. There's so much that you can do. And I'll touch on some examples in a moment. But a big part of that sharing comes out of the listening and understanding the situation, having something that you can share, but then being willing in doing that, not to lead out in front, not to blow your own trumpet or fly your own flag, but actually to get in behind and to support. My dear friends Nevio and Luxenda here, Timorese scientists, both of them leaders amongst their community, both in Timor-Leste and in the work that they're supporting out of Australia as well. And the opportunity to get behind people like that and to give them opportunities to lead from the front and to make a difference. So I want to give you just 3 examples. They're pretty practical examples, but stories, I guess, things that I can reflect on where I can see the importance of having stopped to listen, to take things on board, looking at ways to share and to be able to make a difference, but doing that by supporting local leadership particularly. And they relate to work that we've been involved in Timor-Leste, to an extent in Australia as well, that relate to training, relate to research, relate to public health responses, health system strengthening. Over the last 4 or 5 years, the work that Menzies School of Health Research is doing in Timor-Leste has grown a lot. We've got a team of around 60 people, most of them are Timorese, who are working across a range of different projects, and it's a privilege for me this morning just to give you a little snapshot of some of the things that are happening. You'll hear quite a lot about rheumatic heart disease in this conference, and I'm really glad that it's going to feature. I'm really happy to see Vicky Wade, who's here, and it'll be a privilege to hear from her later on about some of the work that's happening on rheumatic heart disease here in Australia. Rheumatic heart disease has become a big part of my life and my work. I live in the Northern Territory. We see some of the highest rates of rheumatic heart disease in the world. If you look at the rates of rheumatic heart disease in Maningrida, where I visit about once a month, they are literally the highest published rates anywhere in the world. 1% of the children in that community have had cardiac surgery because of rheumatic heart disease. The numbers are extraordinary. 5% of them have definite rheumatic heart disease. It's close to 10% of the children in the community are on regular benzathine penicillin. And so in a community like that, or for that matter in a country like Timor-Leste, where children die regularly in their teens because they've got late-stage rheumatic heart disease and don't have access to cardiac surgery and have presented too late to make a difference with penicillin, it's so important to be able to sit and to listen and to hear and to understand what we can do together. There has been a long history of people going into remote Aboriginal communities, of people going into countries like Timor-Leste and saying, this is what we're going to do for your people, this is how we're going to fix it, this is what you must do, and it doesn't work. And so, in my experience, I've been so lucky, so privileged to sit with people in Maningrida, to sit with people in Timor-Leste, to hear and to understand, okay, what are the priorities here? What do people here want to do to be able to make a difference? How can we work together on this? And one of the standout things that has come through in those conversations has been a real desire to see local people trained. Aboriginal health workers, Timorese health workers, doctors, nurses in remote settings, training local people to be able to recognise, detect, diagnose rheumatic heart disease. There was a great ultrasound workshop yesterday, and some of you got to try your hand at some point-of-care ultrasound for cardiac ultrasound. And what we've discovered is that it's possible to train people of all different backgrounds to be able to use a handheld echo to diagnose rheumatic heart disease, to pick it up. And the impact that this is starting to have in Timor-Leste, in some remote communities around, particularly in Northern Australia, I think is really exciting to see. And for us, it's been a matter of being able to listen and take these things on board. Some of the early echo screening projects I was involved with were well-meaning cardiologists turning up with their fancy equipment and diagnosing kids with rheumatic heart disease, trying to work in well with communities, but to sit, to listen and learn and to recognise that actually this isn't what people are asking for. What people are asking for are for the skills to be built up here, and has led to some really exciting training work and opportunities to invest in local leadership, to see local traditional owners in Maningrida, to see local leaders in Timor-Leste take the lead on delivering training, on communicating about rheumatic heart disease and engaging with the community and with children in the community has been for me a real privilege and work that's ongoing. I want to touch on research briefly, and Menzies does a lot of research. It's in the name of the organisation, but the focus of the research, particularly in Timor-Leste, has been about sitting with the Ministry of Health, understanding what the priorities are in Timor-Leste and trying to work in as well as we can with that. We were really fortunate during the COVID-19 pandemic to receive a lot of funding support, particularly from the Australian government, from the Indo-Pacific Centre for Health Security. And through a network of Australian organisations, the ARIA network, the Australian Regional Immunisation Alliance, received funding to do seroprevalence studies in Timor-Leste that initially had a pretty strong focus on COVID-19. What's been the impact of COVID-19 in Timor-Leste? How many people have been affected and infected by COVID-19? But as we sat with the Ministry of Health, it was really clear that COVID-19 wasn't the only priority, and it shouldn't be. And so designed together a project that would address the question of what is the burden of SARS-CoV-2 in Timor-Leste, but also vaccine-preventable diseases and neglected tropical diseases, and taking the opportunity of this funded research to be able to answer some of the really important questions that are priorities for the Ministry of Health. And it's seen a team continue to work in some of the remotest parts of Timor-Leste, doing a population representative community seroprevalence study, collecting blood from 5,500 people in every municipality of Timor-Leste. And in doing that, these are some preliminary data. Please don't quote me on them. It's an ongoing project. But I guess the point I wanted to make by flashing this up here is that this approach to research isn't about producing a paper which will come out next year or ticking boxes for Menzies School of Health Research. It's about working with the Ministry of Health to say, what are the priorities? what are the questions, where are the answers, and what do we do next? And then using research to make an impact on policy. We were all looking pretty hard at COVID-19 results, and you can see most people have had COVID-19 in Timor-Leste by the time of even these preliminary data. But the thing that really jumped out was that in this young age group, under 15, an incredibly low, scarily low seroprevalence to measles. And this important information has been fed directly back to the Ministry of Health in real time, and then working with the local leadership. So it's the National Immunisation Technical Advisory Group, supporting local leadership to take the lead on decision making. A decision that had to be made, what is the next priority for vaccinating children in Timor-Leste? You know, it's 2022, and the almost intuitive answer to that is, well, COVID-19, it's been approved now for 5 to 11-year-olds, it's been approved now for 6 months to 5-year-olds. Should we be starting to vaccinate all these children against COVID-19? And in fact, the National Immunisation Technical Advisory Group have looked at these data and said, no, that's not our priority. There's an enormous risk of a measles outbreak in Timor-Leste that would be lethal and would be deadly for many children. And so starting next month, there's going to be a catch-up measles vaccine campaign, and we'll be working closely with the government in terms of how that looks and how it's rolled out. You might have noticed an incredibly high dengue seroprevalence there. And dengue is one of the massive problems that's affecting Timor-Leste at the moment. In fact, in around February this year, when Omicron first hit Timor-Leste and case numbers for COVID-19 went crazy again, at the same time, Timor-Leste was facing the worst dengue outbreak it had had in about 15 years. And during that time, more than 60 children died in the National Hospital alone because of dengue. And the tragedy of that, it calls for immediate prioritisation. Are you going to prioritise working on dealing with the Omicron variant that's ripping through, or are you going to prioritise this dengue outbreak that's happening that's taking the lives of children? And so being able to sit and to listen and to understand the priorities and what had to be the priorities in Timor-Leste at the time, and then looking to work together to share some of the opportunities that might exist to address a problem like dengue. The discovery of Wolbachia-infected mosquitoes as a way of tempering dengue transmission is one of the most awesome scientific discoveries of the last 5 or 10 years. And if you don't know much about it, then look up the World Mosquito Program. They've got some great materials, but we've been working with the World Mosquito Program and the Ministry of Health to try to understand whether or not a strategy of infecting Timorese mosquitoes with Wolbachia might make a difference to the ongoing problem of dengue in Timor-Leste. And so some of our colleagues working on an entomology project at the moment, looking at the Aedes mosquitoes and seeing if there's more Aedes aegypti or Aedes albopictus, trying to prepare for the potential for a Wolbachia deployment in Timor-Leste. Something that will be led by the Ministry of Health, my friend Dr. Freddie, looking a little bit fuzzy there, but second from the left, the Director of Public Health, and the opportunity to work with the Ministry of Health on a project like this to understand the local epidemiology, to understand the local mosquitoes, which is a cool sort of departure for a paediatrician like me, and then to work together on thinking, so what is the strategy then, and what can the public health response look like? And so I am going to wrap up, but with those few examples, I want to leave just a couple of questions that are for our country. So these are not finished stories, right? Like, people are still dying of rheumatic heart disease in Timor-Leste and in Australia, people dying in their youth because of rheumatic heart disease. The measles outbreak hasn't happened yet in Timor-Leste, and I hope that it doesn't until that vaccine rollout starts. But it might, and if it does, then what kind of neighbours are we going to be? Where's Australia in that story? The preliminary work on the mosquitoes in Timor-Leste make it look like actually Wolbachia is going to be an excellent strategy for this country. But it'll cost $2 or $3 million to deploy Wolbachia and the mosquitoes in Timor-Leste. Where is Australia in this story, and what opportunity do we have to accompany a country like Timor-Leste and to provide support, to provide meaningful support for their leadership, to share the things that we've got, to sit and listen to their priorities and to support them? This Tetum word, accompagner, is a beautiful word that literally just means to walk alongside, shoulder to shoulder, to go along with. And I think that there are opportunities not only for us as a country, but for us individually as well, to look up and to see the world around us and to see these opportunities, to sit side by side, to listen, to accompany in that sense, to be able to share some of the things that we've got. And for you, it might be sharing on social media, it might be sharing money to support projects that are worthwhile, that you know can make a difference, or it might be that you look for and find opportunities to get out of the country for a bit and really sit alongside people, to mentor, to accompany in that sense. It's the same word that we use for mentor in Timor-Leste as acompaña, somebody who will work alongside, share the things that they've got, share in an open-minded and supportive way to support local leadership. I want to acknowledge the team that we've got. I mentioned there's about 60 of them. I don't think they're all on that slide, but it's a pretty recent one, and to thank them for the work that they're doing, and to thank you too for the opportunity to share some of it this morning. Thanks. Sure.
Josh, thank you so much. Well, I've learned an amazing word today. That is just brilliant. I love that concept of walking alongside someone and sharing your knowledge in that way. It's so great. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to pose to Josh today? Just wave your hand or stand up and we can get you a mic. No? Not yet. Not yet. People are still thinking. Is there anything from Twitter? I have to say, I love this concept of working towards tomorrow, of working towards the future. And there's so many exciting concepts in your talk about the things that we can do in the future and really closing the boundaries. So, we have the internet now, so we are not separated by distance in that way. We can reach out on this platform to communicate and work with each other. And now we can start to close these other boundaries. The Mosquito Project, introducing a biological change. I mean, that's tremendous. Presumably we can use that everywhere.
Yeah, and it has been used, and it's been used really effectively in a number of different countries. But I think that point about the opportunity to close down some of these boundaries and borders is there. Like, it's never been easier to connect the world from a technological point of view. And yet, through the COVID-19 pandemic, if anything, the borders have gone up harder and stronger, and I think we've become more insular rather than less. And people have been so focused on what's happening right here and right in my little world, and countries desperately trying to protect their patch. And I think some of that is a tragedy, and I see opportunities for it to be very different. And I think particularly as we emerge out of this last couple of years, which has been really hard, I think for people to be able to stop and take stock and think, well, actually, what kind of a world do we want to live in? Is it one where we just keep to ourselves and protect our tribe, or is it one where we're going to work together on some of these challenges that are genuinely global challenges, whether it's COVID or dengue or whatever it is?
Yeah, or measles. Reaching out with that vaccine program and really bringing that up. I really hope that we can continue to break down those boundaries and work together, make that global healthcare and that global world. Josh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Josh, it was really amazing to hear about the incredible work that you're doing. And as Sarah mentioned, I've also been really fortunate to be part of SERCAN. And we have an incredible group of passionate, incredible people as part of SERCAN across Australia and New Zealand. I'm wondering whether you have any ideas for how we can expand and use those skills and passion and resources to support or accompagna the work that you're doing.
It's a really lovely question, and I think there definitely are opportunities. Timor-Leste is a country that has had very limited health research since its independence, really, and certainly before that. And there's an appetite for research, so people want to do research. They've seen the impact that it can have in terms of addressing national health priorities and then guiding public health responses particularly. So there's definitely a willingness for research, and so if people are interested in getting involved in research in Timor-Leste, my starting point is to say, yes, there are opportunities, but the opportunities have to be entered into it in the right kind of way, because if you ask me, are we interested in supporting Australian research students to do research in Timor, or are we interested in supporting Timorese health professionals to get research skills? Like, it's definitely the latter. But there are really good opportunities. We've got a number of Australian PhD students, one from the UK, who are doing research in Timor in a way that helps to support and increase local capacity. So there are definitely opportunities for that, and there's at least one study on the horizon that will be, actually two, that will be multinational studies that Timor-Leste will be participating in. So those kinds of opportunities definitely exist. And it's just that all of that governance stuff and the kind of process has to be slow, and it's got to be slow partly in terms of being patient with the processes there and making sure that people are engaged properly. But if people are interested to know more, then I'm really happy to chat about it. And I mean, I obviously know a bit about what happens in Timor-Leste. I think in the region more broadly, similar opportunities, but different challenges. And so I think the main thing is to, like, if you're interested, then ask people, find out a bit more, be a bit patient in that listening period before you dive in with something.